This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Reed Pence. This week, preventing military suicides.
There's so many different causes, them trying to sort of play this game of whack-a-mole to tamp down all of the different fires that are happening. It can feel a bit like they're trying to assemble an airplane in a firefight.
How pressures are greater than ever when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
We know food is so important, not only to feed our bodies, but to feed our souls and feed our spirits.
The cost of rising food prices as the holidays quickly approach. Then,
my grandmother was always preparing stews and soups, and there was always rice puffing away in our rice cooker.
The familiar feel of Korean fare. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
The war on terror has been like no other conflict in our nation's history. Its 20-year duration has been so long that in a survey last summer, nearly half of Americans didn't realize we were still fighting. Also, far more women are in the military. Far more combat injuries are survivable. But each of those factors has contributed to one other tragic difference. 4 times as many active duty and veterans of the post-9/11 war have taken their own lives than have been killed in action. And as the war has dragged on, the suicide rate has been getting worse.
Yes, that is correct, which is just devastating to know and hear.
That's Dr. Ben Soot, whose study into the increasing military suicide rate is part of the Costs of War project at Brown University and Boston University.
Generally speaking, in wartime, suicide rates among active component service members would be going down, except in the case of Vietnam and now the war on terror. So this is unusual. The Department of Defense tends to give a quick line that these numbers should not alarm us, that the rates appear to be about the same as those of the general population in terms of active component service members. But we know that historically this isn't true, that they should be well below that of the general population and in wartime go down. So that the rates have met and surpassed that of the general population should be very concerning for us. And then, of course, looking at veteran population, the rates are nearly double or worse in those younger age groups.
Soot says the character of the war on terror is different from most wars America's fought and creates far more stress on those who are fighting it.
When we're fighting an enemy that blends in with the local population, that they specifically put our service members in positions where they would have to make difficult ethical decisions on the fly, and that they're putting young children and women in harm's way on purpose. Adding to that also the threat of improvised explosive devices just creates a level of fear and uncertainty that greatly enhances the stress burden. And we do have resilience training. We do have methods of trying to help our service members to cope, but it's simultaneously an impossible situation. And so that just is increasing the stress burden that they're facing.
Soot says roadside bombs can be anywhere. That's stressful enough.
Much more than that, what we had is what we called the signature injury of the war on terror, which is traumatic brain injuries. And it's not just 1 or 2, it's the research at least as high as 15. And anecdotally with veterans I've spoken with, they said to me that they knew people that had it in the range of in the 20s. And due to incredible medical advances, we're able to make sure that our troops are healthy and okay, but we keep redeploying them after they've experienced not just 1 or 2 traumatic brain injuries, but I think even the average is about 3. And unfortunately, what we can see from longitudinal data is that there is an increase in suicidal ideation that we can link with an increase in traumatic brain injuries.
Repeated redeployment after such injuries can create what Soot calls a medical triad: PTSD, TBI, and chronic pain. It can leave personnel in an especially vulnerable mental condition.
Couple that with that we also are in our longest war ever, and just that our service members are fighting alongside, sometimes with their children, that they're being redeployed over and over, and that the wartime has lasted for so long. Just this is increasing the number of suicides.
PTSD and suicidal ideation can also be a product of sexual trauma, and that's increased in the military as well during the War on Terror.
We do know that military sexual trauma affects over 23% of the women in the military. And it's not just women. 38% of men in the military have also reported sexual harassment or assault. And so this is any sort of coercion or forced sexual advances or threats of violence around that. About 71% of all women veterans seeking treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder also report having experienced military sexual trauma. And due to the nature of being in the military, you can't just leave the military when something like that happens. So often the victim of the military sexual assault or event has to continue to work with the person that was their attacker. And this obviously would enhance issues of trauma and fear.
Another factor increasing stress that's actually separate from PTSD is what's called moral injury. It's often a product of combat when your sense of good in the world has been ruptured.
This can come from different sources. It can come from yourself, that if you killed someone, and that goes against sort of this self-narrative that you carry with you, that I'm a good person, you might experience moral injury from that. It could be from a sense of betrayal from the military organization or a leader in the military, or even from a feeling of betrayal by God. I spoke with a person who lost the youngest person in his unit, and he was in charge of that young man. He had prayed that God would protect him, and when that young man died, he said he felt personally betrayed by God. And what this does is that it can, depending on the source of it, it can prevent you from piecing together that you are still a good person. And it's really just this whole disruption in your life narrative that when we have these disruptions in our narratives, it creates this very unsettled feeling that we call dissonance. And we would do anything at all to sort of get rid of that feeling of unsettledness.
And sometimes that can include suicide. But Suit says the decision to get help carries a major roadblock: military culture.
I do see that link very clearly. The military culture is one that's very much rooted in that machismo, the male bravura. The issue with that masculine culture is that it is one that specifically avoids help-seeking attitudes, that makes that out to be something that's a weakness. And so one of the big things that we're noticing, seeing that a lot of the suicide prevention training ends up getting pushed to the side as though it's just compulsory but not something to be taken seriously, because we should just be resilient and be able to handle it on our own. And if you need help, then something's wrong with you. You're not resilient. You are weak, and you're not able to hold on to that masculine strength and machismo that is otherwise pushed.
Suit says the Department of Defense has been slow to address military culture in a way that would more forcefully encourage members to seek help when they need it.
The training is just a 1-hour PowerPoint. That's just not going to cut it. We know that service members lie on their screenings because they don't want to lose their careers. They don't want to be ejected from the military early. And if there was any way that we could reframe the way that we look at help-seeking attitudes to see it as a force multiplier, much in the way that they would service their weapon or that they work out, that they care so much about strategy in the field, they need to be taking care of their mental health as well.
The VA, on the other hand, can only be reactive. But Suit says by the time someone's discharged, mental health issues may have a very big head start.
I spoke with the head of suicide prevention actually about it, and it, as much as my report points out that there's so many different causes, them trying to sort of play this game of whack-a-mole to tamp down all of the different fires that are happening, it can feel a bit like they're trying to assemble an airplane in a firefight.
Removing the stigma of suicide and of getting help for the mental health struggles that lead to it is a major goal of prevention groups who advocate an honest and open approach. And it starts with us.
We have to start talking about it, bringing that to light so that we are having discussions that we can help ultimately reduce the stigma that historically has been associated around suicide as well as seeking care for help and mental health needs.
That's Dr. Carla Stumpf Patton, Senior Director of Suicide Postvention Programs at TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. She's also a survivor of loss herself. Her husband, an active-duty Gulf War combat veteran and Marine Corps drill instructor, died by suicide in 1994.
The first step is to talk about it. You're not going to know how much somebody is actually struggling unless you actually ask. So when it comes to suicide, it's very important that we are clear and direct and we ask about it, because if we just assume that somebody else is going to get them help or that they're going to talk to somebody else about that, oftentimes things might be overlooked. And so I would think the first step is to talk about that openly and let that person know, I'm worried about you, I'm concerned, or there's some things that, have me worried and I want to talk about it. And if they're not willing to talk to you, who else would they be willing to talk about?
So when should a loved one or a friend or a battle buddy raise concerns? First, Patton says don't wait to be in a crisis to find out what to do. Several signs occurring together indicate trouble.
Maybe a shift or a change in their personality. They might be either disengaging or maybe isolating more. They might be demonstrating some self-destructive or reckless behavior. They might be feeling like they're just either disconnected or not feeling like they're a part of something, particularly in the military, maybe after a person has been separated out or discharged, while somebody is active duty, they have a very strong sense of connection within their unit. And so transitioning can also be a risk factor and maybe a difficult time. Oftentimes we see increase of either self-medicating through alcohol or drug use or other risky behaviors, just trying to cope with some of the symptoms that they're experiencing. And then therefore they could be developing other problems.
Those might be financial problems, employment difficulties, or relationship issues. If those problems pile up, a service member at risk may feel like they're unfixable or that they're a burden. Patton says that's another reason why it's important to think about the way we talk about suicide.
We want to make sure that we're sending the message to individuals that not only are they not alone, but there is help, there are resources, and with that help, things can get better depending on what they're dealing with. That suicide does not have to be inevitable, and it is something that in many cases can be prevented, but we can't even get to that point if we're not able to talk about it.
We also can't be silent when suicide does occur. Loved ones need care and understanding and need to connect with others who've suffered similar losses to help stabilize complex emotions.
One of the most important things that we try to assess for among survivors of suicide loss is their own mental well-being, because survivors after a suicide loss can be at potentially high risk themselves if they have not been offered quality post-vention care, which is what we focus on at TAPS. So ultimately, we want to make sure that they're getting connected to the resources and the care and the help that they might be needing.
The stigma of suicide reaches survivors, too. It's a potentially difficult issue for them how their loved one will be remembered because of how they died, no matter how well they lived. You can find crisis resources at StopSoldierSuicide.org, at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255, or the Crisis Text Line by texting HELLO to 741-741. You can find those resources on our website as well, radiohealthjournal.org. I'm Reed Pence.
When it comes to health, there is one area that can be difficult to talk about: colon health. Yet this critical area of well-being is heavily influenced by lifestyle choices. Research shows that 75% of colon cancer cases can be avoided by individual actions, and diet is one critical factor. Registered dietitian Courtney Romano is a health advisor for the California Table Grape Commission.
To promote colon health, a diet rich in whole plant-based foods and low in red meat, especially processed meat, is recommended. An easy first step is to eat more vegetables and fruit, including grapes. Fresh grapes have over 1,600 beneficial plant compounds, including antioxidants and other polyphenols. Research indicates that consuming grapes every day may help support a healthy colon.
Maintaining a healthy diet and weight, not smoking, exercising regularly, and getting screened are other important colon health steps. Grapes of all colors, red, green, and black, are part of a healthy diet. Visit grapesfromcalifornia.com for more information.
As we grow older, exercise becomes increasingly important. It can help reduce aches and pains, slow the progression of musculoskeletal conditions, maintain strength and flexibility, and help prevent falls and injuries. All keys to maintaining independence. But how do you get started? Parking farther away from building doors or taking the stairs are starting points. After that, Dr. Michael L. Parks, spokesperson for the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, says to look for a balanced routine.
Be sure to talk with your medical doctor first. Then consider starting slowly. A safe exercise program has several components you can rotate through on different days. First, aerobic conditioning, like walking, water aerobics, or biking. Flexibility and agility exercises, like yoga or Tai Chi. Strength training with free weights or bands. And finally, relaxation techniques.
Organizations such as your local community center can offer resources about effective exercises. For exercise safety tips from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, visit orthoinfo.org.
Cataracts are the #1 cause of vision loss in America and a common part of aging. Now, there is an opportunity for people with cataracts to enhance their vision thanks to innovative technologies and cataract replacement lenses. Acrosoft IQ Vivity is a first-of-its-kind lens, delivering high-quality 20/20 distance vision, excellent intermediate, and functional near vision. People who chose Vivity reported improved vision at various distances for activities such as watching their grandchildren play, working on a computer, and reading. 90% of patients with Vivity stated they are satisfied with their results and would get it again. To learn more about Vivity, visit mycataracts.com. Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision Family of IOLs. Important product information. Description. The Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision IOL is a type of IOL used to focus images clearly onto the back of your eye or retina to allow clear vision after the cataract removal, providing clear distance vision, better intermediate, and some near vision compared to what a monofocal IOL would provide. There is a chance you may still need glasses for distance, intermediate, and/or near vision. Side effects include visual disturbances such as glare, rings around lights, starbursts, and a decrease in ability to distinguish objects from their background, especially in dim lighting. These side effects may make it more difficult to see in some situations. Contrast sensitivity, an important measure of visual function, is the ability to distinguish objects from their background, especially in dim lighting. In the Acrosoft IQ Vivity IOL clinical study, contrast sensitivity in dim lighting was reduced in patients who received the Acrosoft IQ Vivity IOL compared to those who received the monofocal IOL. Attention! As with any surgery, there are risks involved. Prior to surgery, ask your eye doctor to provide you with the patient information brochure for the proposed Acrosoft IQ Vivity Extended Vision IOL to be implanted. This document will further inform you of the risks and benefits associated with this IOL. Discuss any questions about possible risks and benefits with your eye doctor, as well as your medical condition and any eye disease you may have. For more information, visit mycataracts.com.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.
Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
These small facilities are having to take care of patients that they really don't have the resources or the talent to take care of. They do the best they can.
Short-staffed rural hospitals facing an influx of critically ill COVID patients.
Then peripheral artery disease.
Patients can become disabled to some extent. They also can have a risk of having an amputation of the lower limb. And in worst case, they can actually die.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.